Good afternoon. We're nearly there. Thank you very much, Julia. As she said, my name is Zoe Ryan and I am a psoriasis awareness advocate over in Ireland, and I run the psoriasis awareness platform Itching to Tell You. And today I'm posing the question to you, why do we treat psoriasis? Now, as someone living with the condition, this is a question I have long had, and one that I actually asked at this very conference last year to a panel at the end of the day. That is quite literally me asking the question. But it was the response that I got that set the focus of my research over the past year, and it inspired the topic of my latest article submission to the British Association of Dermatology. But before I get on to that, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit of background, if you will, so that you'd understand the purpose, my drive as to why I have a vested interest in knowing the answer to this question. So I would describe myself as a radio and television broadcaster by trade and a psoriasis awareness advocate and educator by vocation. A vocation that I developed a number of years ago, or that was passed on to me following filming a documentary on psoriasis. And it was in the process of filming that documentary that I had the opportunity to speak to a GP who coincidentally had the condition herself on it. And I asked her the question, I said, do I have to treat my psoriasis? If I don't want to, am I doing any harm? And that may seem like an odd or a strange question for a person to ask. I mean, if any of us in this room had as much as a mere flu or common cold, we would engage in some sort of activity to treat it. We have to keep in mind that at that point, I had endured years of going treatment after treatment without seeing the results that I wanted. And there'll be a lot of people in this room today who know the devastating impact of that. Because as they say, it's the hope that will kill you. And with every single treatment, you go in there with hope because you have to. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to endure more. And that particular documentary saw me traipse across the country, trying out different alternative routes to treatment, including, as you'll see there, some Chinese herbal medicine, seaweed baths, dipping my head into holy wells, even being prayed upon by a seven-son faith healer. I really went deep. And I'd had enough. I did not want to do it anymore. And for that reason, I asked the question. And she told me, no, if you are happy to live with the symptoms of the condition, then you do not need to treat it and you're not doing any harm. And so I grabbed that trusted piece of information from a medical professional with both hands, held it dear, and went about developing an awareness platform to educate people on psoriasis and to, I suppose, promote this policy of acceptance. I shared my views with others that encouraging them, instead of us trying to rid our skin of the psoriatic lesions, something rare and difficult to achieve, instead of torturing our bodies and minds trying to achieve that, let's unburden ourselves and embrace them. Fast forward a number of years later, I find myself studying in medical school. And the science suggested to me that the advice I had been giving a number of years previous may have been ill-advised. And I was faced with the harsh possibility that by following and promoting that way of thinking, I had been doing damage to both myself and to others. So, why do we treat psoriasis? To alleviate the symptoms and to address the underlying inflammation that is driving them. What I'm proposing to you today is that we rethink, we reframe, we rephrase, if you will, why we treat psoriasis. Why not to alleviate the symptoms by addressing the underlying inflammation driving them? Because that is essentially what most of the treatments that are currently on the market are doing. It's just they're not marketed to patients in that way. From my experience, the majority of people living with the condition are completely unaware about the cause, the inflammation, because there is such a heavy focus on the external indicators of that inflammation, the skin involvement. I find, because the treatment options at present are geared at the skin, there is a suggested or a perceived understanding that if you do not want to do anything about the skin, then you do not have to undergo treatment. But are we right to do that? It has been said today already that in recent years, psoriasis has rightly been classed as a systematic disease. So disease that affects multiple organs and systems in the body, not just the skin. So knowing that, we know that the skin disruptions that we see are only a sign, an indication of the internal inflammation. Now, this is a slide that I regularly use when I am lecturing to students on psoriasis. And it is an analogy that I use to explain or describe the inflammation that you have, the internal inflammation with psoriasis, of a wildfire. So by not engaging in treatment, are we letting that fire uncurtailed, causing damage internally? Are we unknowingly and unintentionally increasing our likelihood down the line of experiencing associated health issues that are considered to be more severe, the likes of your psoriatic arthritis, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome? The science suggests so, but the research hasn't yet provided us with definite answers. At last year's conference, it was repeatedly said that the main aim and desired outcome of treatment is to clear the skin. So I said, is that because if you see clear skin, it's an indication that you have successfully suppressed the internal inflammation? And the response that I got was surprising in some ways, but not in others. It was, well, patients want clear skin. Why do we as a society strive to achieve clear skin? Yet again, the answer is very simple. Because society says so. From a young age, we are indoctrinated by the media to believe that clear skin is the goal. That to have cleared skin, we are considered healthy, beautiful, desirable, successful. And marked skin, well, it has become synonymous with negative connotations. Our desire for clear skin isn't purely vanity. No, it is to feel accepted, to not be feared, mocked, or villainized. The stress and anxiety, the mental health implications of living with a visual difference, something we've heard about extensively today, is not something to be dismissed. We need only look to Hollywood for an answer as to why we want clear skin. But I argue that our focus and obsession with clearing the skin when it comes to treatment is perhaps overshadowing what the treatments are actually doing, and that I suggest that's where we should be focusing. For me, the focus on the skin when it comes to treatment is an area of concern, because by focusing on the skin, we are reinforcing the outdated understanding that psoriasis is a skin condition. That in turn leads to patients thinking that the problem starts and ends with the skin, thus resulting in them perhaps seeking treatments and management products that are often ineffective and experiencing devastating blows when they don't achieve the desired results because they don't fully understand it. We are fueling the societal need to achieve clear skin to be accepted, but we're also deterring people living with the disease who, like myself, are happy to live with the symptoms from seeking treatment, unintentionally steering them away from care and perhaps contributing to our likelihood of developing comorbidities. As such, it is misleading, damaging, potentially negligent. What I added in last night, having a couple of conversations, was an extra slide, and I've titled it Categorization, Choice and Control. Now, if we consider the presentations that we have psoriasis and we picture a scale, on one end of the scale, we have your severe psoriasis and your emergency scenarios. For instance, if general pustular psoriasis or arthroderma go out of control, which we've heard today, hospitalization is required. In those scenarios, treatment is no longer an option, but a necessity. And I've no doubt that some of you sitting here today or listening further afield will have experienced that. For those of us that fall under the category of mild to moderate psoriasis, that category of grouping at present, we're giving the choice. But my argument is, are we always given the appropriate education, understanding of the condition and the treatment options available to us to make the best choice there? Could early intervention, which we've heard today, at perhaps the mild to moderate stage, to control that inflammation, could that stop the disease from progressing to maybe one of the more severe cases? Could it reduce the amount of those emergency situations that we see? And could it reduce our comorbidities? So if we consider what I'm proposing today, that we shift the thinking of why we treat psoriasis, focusing less so on the skin and more so on what we're doing, the process of it, addressing the internal inflammation. In regards to today's title, the theme of today, the challenges, the opportunities, the solutions, if we consider the theme of today's conference in relation to this, from moving away from the way of thinking that we have and placing the emphasis on the internal inflammation rather than the skin, we're challenging the historic and outdated belief and understanding that psoriasis is a skin condition, something we rightly should be doing. We're also going against the societal perspective that clear skin is the thing to be achieved. But we also have another challenge, the challenge of getting medical professionals to come on board with this new way of thinking and approach to care. There have been efforts in recent times to come on board with this concept of patient activation, where the patient is fully informed and armed with the decisions that they need in order to co-design their treatment with their professional, their medical professional. And there has been some hesitancy from medical professionals about this, about handing over some of that power, moving away from that old way of thinking of doctor tells, patient listens, perhaps more so in Ireland than what happens here today, from what I've heard today. What I'm suggesting to you today is that the solution that we want is that by changing the way we market or pitch treatments to those living with the condition, we're moving away from the old way of thinking and onto the new age. By putting the focus on the process rather than the result, so at this present moment, the process as to how we achieve clear skin is reducing the inflammation, I would argue that this is the way forward, that we change that focus, we provide the patients with better education so that we're arming them with that information and the tools for them to make more informed and appropriate decisions when it comes to treatment. And that should result in better outcomes, or at least better understanding of the outcomes that they get. So to the researchers and medical professionals listening, I ask you, why should we be treating psoriasis? And what are the implications of not treating it? And if you can't answer those questions, maybe that is something to be explored. Because as has been said throughout today, as patients, we are made very well aware of the implications or the side effects of undergoing the treatments, less so the implications of not.